All right, so let's get started. So before that, happy Tamil New Year to everybody. And so we can get started now. Right, dedicated to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Please join me with this prayer. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, who has opened my eyes, which were blinded by the darkness of ignorance, with the torchlight of knowledge. Also join me with this Prabhupada Pranam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. And also the Panchatattva prayer, and we will recite the Hare Krishna Mahamantra 3 times. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We will say some words in glorification of the Bhagavad Gita. So this is from the Sri Vaishnavya Tantra Sara, verse 33. Samukta sasuke loke karmana nopalipyate mahapapati papani gita jai karoti ched na kinchet sprishyate tasya nalini dalam ambasha. Meaning is, a person who is devoted to studying the Gita is liberated and happy. Although acting in this world, he is not implicated. Even if by chance a person who studies the Gita happens to commit extremely horrible sins, he cannot be affected by that, just as a lotus leaf cannot be touched by even a drop of water. So join me also for this invocation prayer. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are recapping chapter 14, which we covered yesterday. So the title was The 3 Modes of Material Nature. So here we talked about basically all these points that I'm putting up here, but we will not go through those today. I will just give you the key takeaway points so that we can remember a little bit of what we talked about yesterday. The first is Mother Prakriti and Krishna, the Father. So this is to help us to understand. Here, this chapter, Krishna is basically talking about the material nature. And then how do the jivas, who are supposed to be transcendental and spiritual, how did we suddenly end up in association with the material energy? So that was what it was discussed. So we can understand, because we wanted to enjoy our desires in the material world, Mother Prakriti became the mother, the material nature became the mother. And because we are from Krishna, therefore Krishna is the father. So this we discussed in detail yesterday. And Now, Prakriti has its nature. So, since we are now enmeshed in Prakriti within this material world, it's important for us to understand how this material world works. So, therefore, the first understanding begins with knowing its nature. So, there are three natures, three gunas or qualities: sattva, rajas, and tamaguna. So, we talked about that. And in other chapters later on, we will again explore those three gunas in more detail. And we can also understand that after describing this Prakriti, Krishna also talks about transcending these three gunas. So the three gunas are like the rope which ties us to this material world, ties the soul down. So in order for us to escape it, we need to transcend these three modes. We need to go beyond these three modes. So amongst the three modes, the mode of goodness was the best mode, but even that is binding. So we needed to transcend that also. So we need to get to the mode of goodness first, and then from there, step to transcendence. So that's the idea. So, and when we transcend that three modes, then we are already in the level of Brahman realization. So therefore, Krishna after that says, but that Brahman, I am the basis. So Krishna is indirectly telling, go beyond even Brahman. Come to me directly to Bhagavan realization. And today, chapter 15, the Yoga of the Supreme Person. So the Sanskrit title is Purushottama Yoga. Purushottama comes from the word Purusha Uttama. So we will talk about that later in this chapter. So what's the connection? The connection here is earlier chapter, Krishna was talking about the three modes, Prakriti, the three modes, and then how we are trapped, and then how to transcend the Prakriti, and then Supreme Lord is the basis of Brahman. So in chapter 15, he goes more details on the transcending process. So how to understand the the Prakriti's nature and how to transcend it further. So we will talk about that. But before we speak about the verses in chapter 15, I want to begin with a story. So, and this story will have a moral which will connect with our chapter. So, as I said, okay, now mind. Let's go with the story first. So, once upon a time, there was a king, so a Maharaja, and you know, kings are fabulously rich, and they have all kinds of pre British and all these times. India was the wealthiest country in the world because they had so many jewels and gold. So this king had a very wonderful jewel, and he put that jewel in a necklace. So you can see the necklace there. So this is actually the Hope Diamond, but anyway, I'm just putting it here. Anyway, the Hope Diamond came from India also. So right. So because the king, he was very affectionate to his daughter. He had a daughter, so a princess. So he gave this necklace to this daughter as a birthday gift. So this daughter was the princess was very attached to this necklace. She will wear it all the time. And even when she goes for everything, even any kind of outing or whatever it is she does, she will always have this necklace on her. So once she went to a river with all her handmaidens to go and take a bath. So she went to the river, and she, when you take a bath, they take off all their things and everything. But and the necklace also, she took it out, and it was kept in one place. And they used to, those days, this is like a new spot in the river, so they just hung their clothes on tree branches. So she also hung the necklace together with other things on the tree branch. So while they were bathing, it was bright sunlight, and the sunlight glanced upon this necklace, and it sparkled very beautifully, and it attracted the attention of this magpie. It's a type of bird. This magpie likes to steal shiny things. Yeah. So what it did, it saw this very shiny thing, and it just came and it gripped it with its claws, and it flew away. So once it flew away, then later when the princess came, obviously she couldn't find the necklace. Everything else is there, but then the necklace wasn't there. And then there was a big hue and cry raised, and she started crying and all that. And eventually she came to the king and told the king, and the king said, well, it must be somewhere within this kingdom. So what I will do is, we will have a reward. We will announce a reward. So anybody who's able to get this necklace, right, will get a handsome reward. So initially the king told the princess, you might not get it back, it's difficult. Can I get for you a different one next time? But the princess was adamant, no, no, I want that necklace. It's so beautiful. I remember each of its facets. So I don't want something else. So then the king, okay, fine, I will set this reward and I will give a large amount of money for the person who is able to give this necklace. So everybody was searching everywhere. The whole kingdom, they were looking high and low for this necklace. And then there was this farmer. So this farmer is the hero. So he happened to also know about this announcement, and he was going around, but he didn't really think he had a chance. It could be anywhere after all. But it so happened that he was walking amongst a bank, and in that bank, suddenly he happened to just look, and he saw glimmering in the water near the shallow bank, the a very shiny thing. So then when he looked closer, he thought he saw a beautiful jeweled necklace glimmering and sparkling within, it's glimmering on the water. Then he thought, oh, this is my lucky day. I'm going to become a rich man suddenly overnight. So then he quickly jumped into that. It was a shallow area, so he waded into, but it's not that shallow. Still, he went, and as soon as he went, and he started looking everywhere, but in that area where he earlier saw it, he couldn't find that necklace. Then he was like very perplexed. Then disappointed, he came back up to the shore, and then he was like thinking, what happened? And then as he kept looking, then suddenly the necklace formed again. He could see the necklace again. So then he thought, what could it be? Then again he jumped into the water. But as soon as he jumped into the water, the necklace again disappeared. So like that, he did it a few times, and then he became extremely perplexed and extremely puzzled. What could be the reason? So there was a sage or a saint who was sitting nearby the tree over there. It so happened that he happened to be there. And he was, rather, he was disturbed by this commotion. And then he looked, and then he asked, what's the problem? Why are you trying to jump into the water and coming out and jumping in and coming out? Then this man, he gave his obeisances to the sage. He told the sage the full story. And then the sage smiled at him. So he was looking and smiling. So then he told the man, well, I will do you a favor. So next time when you look into the water, why don't you look up on above the water? So then the man said, well, the necklace is in the water. Yes, I know the necklace is in the water, but why don't you look up? So then the man, okay, fine, he's a holy man, I should look up. And lo and behold, he saw that the necklace was actually hanging from a branch from the tree. And what he actually saw in the water was just a reflection of the necklace. So that's why each time he jumped into the water, the reflection broke as soon as the water surface broke. So anyway, now he knows. He was very happy. He thanked the sage, and then and then happy story lah. You know how it would have ended. So let's not go into that. But the point is, it rather connects with our first verse in this chapter. So Krishna is saying in the first verse, chapter 15, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Urdhva Moolam Adha Shakam Ashwatham Prahur Avyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavid. Translation: the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree Arasamaram, banyan tree, that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. So here Krishna is giving an analogy. He's trying to, pass a point to Arjuna using examples, using an analogy, a comparison. So let's try to understand what is this upside down banyan tree, where the root is up. We have never seen such a thing, isn't it? A tree where the root is up, whereas the branches are downwards. So in 15:2, Krishna continues, the branches of this tree extend downward and upward both ways, nourished by the three modes of material nature. So now Arjuna begins to understand what is this banyan tree Krishna is trying to speak about. So basically, he's talking about the network of activities. So he's saying that this banyan tree, this upside down banyan tree, has so much of branches everywhere and roots branching up and down. But where is the nourishment coming from? The nourishment is basically coming from the three modes of material nature. So basically, we can understand the three modes of material nature is the part of Prakriti, and Prakriti is material nature. So this banyan tree are the results, are the actions and the resultant actions caused by the three modes of material nature. Krishna already explained that point in the previous chapter, but again, he is now highlighting it to be making it more clearer by giving an example. So then he says that we know the roots are deriving nourishment from Tamaguna, Sattva-guna, and Rajaguna, the three modes. But what about the branches and the twigs? So the twigs are the objects of the senses. So objects of the senses here can mean, for example, economic development. It can mean sense gratification, what we want to do. We want to enjoy this. We want to taste this. We want to see that. We want to hear this. So what pleases our senses? And basically, why do we work? We want to get some economic development, right? Or even sense objects. So all these things are considered the twigs. So this tree has also roots going down. So it has roots upwards, deriving nutrition from the three modes, and it's also going down. That means it's continuously growing, and it's a very complex network. We can imagine, it's actually difficult to imagine such a tree. Here we have one of our artists who have actually tried to draw this tree. Very complicated. So basically the idea is it's very complicated. It's very entangling. So that is the analogy Krishna is trying to say, that these material activities that we do, all these material activities are extremely entangling. Once we start climbing this tree, we will get lost. Practically, we will get lost. So that's what happens. And in last chapter also, we mentioned how the person who is completely, taking part only in the materialistic activities, and he does not have time to look into spiritual pursuits or anything like that, he is basically wasting his life, living in vain, because the purpose of human life was hinted in other chapters already. So the purpose is to go beyond these three modes so that we can be free. Otherwise, other species of life is also suitable for us to enjoy sense gratification, isn't it? For example, the monkey has so many partners. If the monkey wants to enjoy sexual relationship, right, then might as well be a monkey. Why be a human? Isn't it? So if that was the purpose of the goal of life. So if the pig likes to eat anything, the pig can just eat everything and anything, and he enjoys everything. You can see how fat the pig becomes. So if our purpose of life, some people say we live to eat. So some people, they live to eat. So then you don't have to be a human for that. We can become, then the material nature will say, well, if that's your desire, if your goal is just to eat, then in the next life, you can become a pig. Then you will enjoy even more. Or if our goal is to just sleep, then we can be a grizzly bear. they sleep for 6 months. So enjoy slumber for 6 months, or a polar bear like that. So that is the idea. So human life is not meant for eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. It is actually the only species where we can actually go beyond this material nature. We can actually escape. So it's like a special situation. And if we don't take advantage of this and we simply get lost in this material network of this banyan tree, of all kinds of things, then it's basically a complete waste. So that's what is Krishna saying. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. So there is no end to it. If the roots are continuously going down, there is simply no end. If we think that we will be done with certain things and then we can move on to some other aspects, we are thinking again, because it will just go on and on and on and on, right? For example, we will think now we are working, we will have children, then the children, oh, somebody has to take care of the children. Then after that, once the children grow up, oh, we think we'll be happy, but then no, they will get married. And then if they may not get married, and then that will create another issue. So then when they do get married also, so then they will have their own problems, and they will have their own children. Then the parents will say, oh no, I need to look after their children, grandchildren, and then like that it will go on and on. So and we will get entrapped in their problems after that. So the grandchildren's problem, we will get entrapped with that. So there's never going to be a time when one can learn to renounce and focus on spiritual activities to escape. So one has to understand this. So what are these fruitive actions? It basically, all these activities, they lead towards two things: impious acts and pious acts. So sin and papa. So together, the more we sin, or the more, even piety also, both also trap us. The piety will trap us with golden silk ropes, whereas the sinful reaction will trap us with hot, burning, thorny ropes. But both also are trapping us within this material world. So it's quite a bit of a summary which Krishna is giving us of what all the topics that he has covered so far. And then in 15.3, he says, now the real form, just like how we mentioned earlier, the story I gave you about the necklace, the necklace and the reflection of the necklace. So now if there is a reflection, so this banyan tree is growing downwards. So where have we seen a tree which is growing opposite direction, growing downwards? The only place we have seen is when we look at a reflection, isn't it? So just like this, we see the tree, the real tree, but if you are not looking at the real tree, if you are always busy looking only at the reflection, so that is the idea here. So it has, this reflection has its source. So now Krishna is saying the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. So where is it then if it's not in this world? The idea is it's in the spiritual world. So every activity, every action, everything in this world, just like our bodies, our material bodies are made in the image of the spiritual Lord, of the Supreme Lord, who is in the spiritual realm. So similarly, every behavior, activity, experience, feeling, if we feel love, if we feel anger, all these things are there in the spiritual world also. But it is all dovetailed towards Krishna's service. So that is the actual thing. What we have here in this material world is nothing but a pale reflection. So the real form cannot be perceived in this world. We can only hear about it from scripture, and we have to go to the spiritual world to actually experience it. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. So this network of material activities has no end. It goes on since time immemorial. So we don't know when we actually came and got entrapped here. So that was the issue. But Krishna says, but with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. So first of all, we must learn to see this tree if you're going to cut it down. How do we see this? We can only see this if we can get the knowledge about all these things. So the Bhagavad Gita has given us the knowledge about, karma, akarma, vikarma, what is sin, what is not considered sin, what are the things that bind us, the three modes of nature. All this is knowledge, which is giving us the ability for us to look and see this tree. So with jnana chakshu, that means with the eyes of knowledge, born out of the Vedas, we can understand this. We can learn to see it. And once we learn to see it with determination, knowing what it actually is, nothing but a pale reflection which is trapping us within this world. Knowing this, as the more we hear about it, the more we know it, our faith becomes stronger and our determination becomes stronger. Then we can cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. So this is where we learn to renounce. How can we detach? We cannot detach unless we get attached to something higher. So that's where the yoga process comes into the play. Okay, all this we mentioned already. So this is the weapon of detachment. It's an axe. Okay, anyway, then Krishna continues. Thereafter, after we cut down this material, this tree, right? How to detach? We cannot just detach. We cannot cut off this tree unless we have an attachment to something higher. So therefore, Krishna says in 15:4, thereafter one must seek that place from which having gone, one never returns. That means he's telling Arjuna, set your eyes in the spiritual realm, set your eyes at my lotus feet. Because it's not possible for us to enjoy the kingdom of God without God. So it is by his grace and by his mercy. So therefore, we need to set our eyes on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So once we do that, once we go there, one never returns. And there, surrender. What do we do? And there, surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So Krishna is saying that. So he already clearly mentioned that he is that Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he already clearly mentioned about his vibhutis, his supremacy, and all these things in the previous chapters. And then he's saying how to enter the kingdom of God. You need to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That means we have to understand that he is the object and goal of our existence. Jivera Swarupa Hoy, Krishnera Nityadas. Our constitutional position is to have loving relationship and seva towards that Supreme Purusha. So we are trying to, now our problem is we are not accepting our role as Das. Das means servant of the Supreme Lord. We are trying to become mini Purushas. So that's why we have to take this body, the Kshetra, and we have to stay in this material world. The moment we can fully reconcile ourselves with the servitude mentality to be the Das and not the Purusha, serve who? Serve the Purusha Uttama. Uttama means the supreme, the highest enjoyer. So Purusha Uttama, and that is none other than the Supreme Lord. That's why he's known as Purushottama. And this chapter is called Purushottama Yoga. So then we have next verse. So Krishna is now telling, okay, this is we can just say the verse. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha dvandvair vimukta shuka dukkha samjnair gachanti ammudaha padam avyayam tat. Translation. So once we focus on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, right, then what we will get. So Krishna is telling those who are the types of people who can do this. So Krishna is telling us those who are free from false prestige. That means not egoistic. That means humble people. Illusion, free from illusion, because they now have the eyes of scripture to be able to understand, they can now view this banyan tree, this upside down banyan tree. And at the same time, they also heard about the, what do you call, the spiritual world, and also free from false association. That means mixing with the wrong type of people. Because if we mix with materialistic people, we can forget about our journey back to Godhead, because they will bring us down to their materialistic standards. So we have to remember this. Who else? Those who understand the eternal. So we need to take association of those who know about these things, the eternal aspect of the creation. Those who are done with material lust, that means people who are fed up with material lust, they don't want to, they have given it up, they have detached from it. So this comes slowly by following the process of yoga. So then we can give up our desire and learn to be desireless, because that becomes the cause of our entrapment, the desire. Once we become desireless for enjoyment in this material world, that's when we can actually get free of the three modes of the material nature and go back to God. So those who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress within this material world, who learn to tolerate both equally as simply waves of this material ocean. Because whatever happiness within this material ocean has a beginning and an end. Whereas the yogi is fixed upon that happiness which is called Ananda. Now Ananda is different from Shuka. Happiness here is Shuka. This Shuka has a beginning and an end. So it is material. Whereas Ananda is eternal and it's blissful and it's spiritual. So it never ends. So the real yogi always wants to go for that. The person, the intelligent person would want eternal happiness, isn't it? And then what else? And who unbewildered know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person. So how to surrender to the Supreme Lord? So for that, we have the bhakti path, and we need to take instruction from those who are able to show us the way. That's why Krishna earlier talked about accepting a guru. And in this way, we can attain to that eternal kingdom, right? So earlier also in the previous chapter, Krishna talked about who are the types of people he considers as priyam. Those are those types of people he is dear to, right? And some of these qualities have already been discussed in that chapter yesterday. Sorry, not yesterday, in chapter 12. In chapter 12 that was discussed. So now let's stop for a while and take stock with what we have covered so far in the Bhagavad Gita. So in the beginning, from verses 1 to 4, Krishna talks about the material world and its network of karma and desire. You know, how the material world we can trapped within because of the desire being the root cause. You can see here desire being the root cause, and this and due to this desire we drop to this material world, and we get entangled with the various activities and reactions due to the desire. So we talked about the vision to see the world. How we talked about how we can understand what this material world actually is. So that is like the banyan tree. And we can understand it is nothing but a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. So we are not looking at the real thing. We are busy staring, just like the story about the man who was looking at the reflection of the jewel rather than looking up. So we need someone to show us, don't look down, look up. So just like the sage did that for that man. So similarly, we need the light of the Bhagavad Gita, the instruction of the Guru, so he can show us where to look. And with vision comes knowledge, and thus determination for emancipation. Emancipation means we want to get free. So that determination becomes strong. And then Krishna talks about the goal of that human life, which is going to attaining the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord in that spiritual world. And he describes also that spiritual world in verse 6. He says how in the spiritual world, everything is effulgent. So we don't cover that verse here. We will move on to the next point. Then from verse 7 to 11, Krishna talks about the conditioned jiva. Now he talked about this banyan tree, which is like the upside down banyan tree, which is the materialistic activities, right? And he talked about how we get trapped in this, in actions and reactions, both impious and pious activities. So now he talks a bit more about that conditioned jiva. So the jiva who is not trapped within this banyan tree, this network of materialistic activities, Krishna gives his points. What's actually happening to him? So remember chapter 2, we talked about reincarnation and all that. So in 15.7, Krishna says, again he mentions the point again. The living entities in this conditioned world, first he says, they are my eternal fragmental parts. So remember yesterday and the day before, we talked about Ishvara, Jiva, and Prakriti, right? We talked about how we need to know what is Kshetra, what is Kshetranyan. Kshetra is the body, Kshetranyan is the soul who knows the body. And then there is also another Kshetranyan who is Krishna. So like that, we talked about these things. So in those discussions, I mentioned that we are also Brahman. Krishna is Brahman, we are part of that Brahman. Krishna is Para Brahman. So we are part and parcel of that Supreme Lord. I gave the example of the gold and gold mine. So the gold particle and the gold mine. So Krishna is like the gold mine and we are like the gold particle. So we have the same quality. We are actually coming from that gold mine. So we are actually a part of that spiritual energy of the Lord. Okay, so here he's mentioning that again. Very clearly he's saying, we are, before this also Krishna said, I am the seed-giving father, isn't it? And I impregnate all the living jivas into the Prakriti. So again, he's reconfirming this. These living entities are all my eternal fragmental parts. They are all part of my spiritual energy, jivas. So why are we in this conditioned world? Why are we conditioned? So I mentioned just now, it's due to desire. So misused freedom. We have the independence, but the independence was misused so that we wanted to become Purusha, just like our father. We wanted to also enjoy, just like our father. We didn't realize that serving the Supreme Lord is the best enjoyment for us. So that aspect is something which we can understand later on, how to enjoy in that role. So due to our desires, our carnal desires within this material world, right? We have been here for many lifetimes. And due to that many lifetimes, our desires have gone through evolution, modification, and all that. And we develop some impressions due to our last birth. So these are called vasanas. So the impressions from our last birth and with our desire, it determines what will be our next life. So remember, Krishna also said, whatever we think at the time of death, that is what we will attain. So at the time of death, if whatever desires that we have not yet fulfilled will be very much strong in our consciousness. So that's why it's very important to purify the consciousness. But for the normal person who doesn't understand this, the desires will be very strong. He'll feel frustrated or whatever, and he has impressions. So both based on this and also based on one more factor. One more factor is the factor of karma. Now the karma acts as a constraint. It acts as a limitation to our desire. Now we may desire all kinds of things, but do we deserve it? Because have we done pious activities to deserve it? Or have we done so much of sinful activities which actually remove our privilege to attain our desires? So adjusted by our sin and our piety, which is controlled by karma, This will give us what we need in our next life. So like that, it goes on and on and on, time immemorial, and we go through the cycles of birth, disease, old age, and death, and then controlled by these three modes of material nature and subjected to the three miseries, which is due to other living entities, due to nature, and due to our own mind. So therefore, it is actually a prison. This is actually what the banyan tree Krishna was talking about. We become enmeshed within this network. Another way of looking at it. So again, let's take stock here. So after talking about the material world and its network of karma and desire, Krishna now talks about conditioned jiva. So what the jiva goes through. So here we have skipped quite a number of verses. So in the interest of saving time, so we are going to look at other points. So here I'm just summarizing it for you. 5.7, Krishna shows that jiva are part and parcel of him. And then from 7 to 9, Krishna talks about the transmigration of the soul, how the soul takes different birth according to his desire. So it's mentioned just like how the fragrance of the rose is carried to our nose by air. So the air is invisible, the fragrance is also invisible. So just like how the rose fragrance is carried invisibly by air to bring it to our nostrils so we can smell it. So in the same way, at the time of death, the subtle body, which is made up of mind, intelligence, and false ego, carries this soul, and like the subtle body is like the air, and the fragrance is like the soul. It carries it to another body, to another person. It's described very poetically like that in this verse, one of these verse. So then Krishna says, now, but the endeavoring yogi or bhakta can see all this very clearly. He understands all this very clearly because he has got the transcendental jnana vision, because he has heard about all these things from Bhagavad Gita. So therefore, the jiva can begin the process of unconditioning himself so that he can escape from this prison. So the key here is it begins with knowledge. And how do we get knowledge? We can get knowledge only by hearing or reading, by the guidance of a guru who comes in the line of the disciplic succession, parampara. So then Krishna, from verse 12 to 15, he starts telling Arjuna about now this jiva who's conditioned. He gets this knowledge, he follows the path, and what is that goal? What is that goal? Again, he summarizes it using different verses. He talks about how he is the goal, how Krishna is the supreme goal. So he makes it very clear. I am the Purushottama. I am the Purusha Uttama. And how Krishna says, I have done so much for all these conditioned souls. For all these conditioned souls, I am the one who gives them that facility. I am the one who enables their desires to be fulfilled continuously. But it has to be subjected to karma, because there has to be justice for every other living entity also. So therefore, the Supreme Lord has been truly our eternal well-wisher. Why eternal? Because right from the onset, from the spiritual world, right from the moment we started getting enmeshed in this material world, he has been constantly with us, right? I remember the example of the parrot, the two parrots in the tree, which I talked about one of the classes. So he is our eternal well-wisher. So 12 to 15 talks about Purushottama Krishna and talks about how he is eternal well-wisher. So we will look at some of these verses. So the first one where Krishna says, he's the Purusha Uttama, Purushottama, right? So he says, I am the splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world for the benefits of all the living entities. Because without the sun, we cannot live in this material world. And where does the splendor of the sun come from? It comes from me, Arjuna, Krishna says. It is by my mercy that it comes for the benefit of he doesn't need the sun. Krishna doesn't need it. all these things are created for the benefit of the jivas, the conditioned jivas within this material world. And then Krishna says, the splendor of the moon and the splendor of fire are also from me. Now we cannot live without the fire as well, right? And actually, we also cannot live without the moon, because moon actually controls many things. Gravitation, it controls our mind actually. You know, we see how the tide rises and reduces just by the effect of the moon. So that is the water body. But you know, at the same time, our bodies is made up of about 75% water. So if the entire ocean and lakes can be affected by the gravitation of the moon, do you not think that our bodies made up of 75% water is affected? So it actually, the moon, even in astrology, the moon represents the mind. So not only that, the moon also, so this is splendor of, we definitely need fire to survive in this world, right? And the moon also, I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. So this is Vedic science. It's also Ayurvedic science. It's mentioned that while the sun gives energy, right, it is the moon that gives nourishment to the vegetables. So if there is any juice, if there is any nourishment to make it potent, that is due to the power of the moon. So this is Vedic science. And Krishna continues, I am also the one who causes all the planets to remain in orbit. Otherwise, you know, if our Earth planet it's even 1 degree tilted incorrectly, you know, the Earth is slightly tilted, isn't it? Even 1 degree it is tilted extra, then life on Earth will cease to exist. So the same thing goes for the position of the orbits. If the Earth is even a few degrees away in its orbit, either more or less, life on Earth, as we know, cannot exist. And this is scientific fact. It's proven, all right? So Krishna is saying, I am doing this for the benefit of the jivas. I am also the fire of digestion, right? I've given you fire. I've given you the moon to give you juice. I've given you the sun by which all life exists. But you want to eat. We want to eat that food. We want to enjoy. So Krishna is also helping us to even enjoy that. So without good digestion, what can we enjoy, isn't it? So some people, we want to cook so many things, but then we cannot eat so many things because we cannot digest. So I am the fire of digestion. So this fire, you know, in science, we understand we have acid in our stomach. So this acid is like fire, the Jatagni, according to Ayurveda. I am also the air of life, which we breathe. So Krishna talks like this. So basically establishes, I am that Purushottama. So, and then this is a very nice verse. It continues in the same vein of Purushottama. So we will just say this. Sarvasya chaham hridishani vishto matta smritirnyanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarver aham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. So it's a very famous verse. This is the verse, we call it the verse of remembrance. So translation is, I'm seated in everyone's heart. So this we already knew earlier. He is Paramatma. And what does Paramatma do? Here, he gives more information on what Paramatma does. And from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness, according to what we deserve, right? And because Jiva also sometimes wishes to forget. So therefore, remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness comes from the Paramatma within our heart. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. So he is the goal of the Vedas. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta. So it was compiled by Krishna Dwapana Vyasa. Vyasa Dev is actually an incarnation of Krishna. And I am the knower of the Vedas. So because these things has to be given by God, it cannot be man-made. So therefore, he confirms that all this is coming directly from Krishna. So the material world, so let's take again we stop and take stock. So we have understood about the material world and its network in this chapter, how Krishna talked about the conditioned jiva, how he talked about him being the Purushottama and also the eternal well-wisher. So in this part, these were some of the things that subsections which he covered. The supreme splendor about the sun, of the moon, of fire, the supreme maintainer, how does he maintain? By being the juice of life in the moonlight, by maintaining the orbits, the planets in orbit, by maintaining the fire of digestion, examples, right? By giving us remembrance, forgetfulness, and knowledge. And then he talks about the Purusha and Purusha Uttama. So this verse we don't cover. So basically he talks about how he is the source of all the jivas. And then he says there are how the jivas actually come from him and how they are trapped within this material world. So that verse covers the Purusha. Purusha means the jivas, all of us trying the conditioned souls within this material world, and the Supreme Lord. Talks about that in more detail. So then finally, he talks about the ultimate goal of existence, and we will cover these two verses. So verse 19, Yo mam evam asamuddho janati purushottamam sa sarvavid bhajati mam sarva bhavena bharata. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. So he's talking about the ultimate person who has attained the highest knowledge. The goal of knowledge. Remember earlier we in different chapters we talked about jnana, knowledge, and the goal of knowledge, jnayam, right? This was the topic, chapter 13, I think. Kshetra jnana, and all that. So we talked about jnana and we talked about jnayam. Jnayam was the goal of knowledge. So he therefore engages. So what does the person who has understood the jnayam do? So the jnani who has or the bhakta who has understood that supreme goal, which is none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, what does he do? He engages himself fully. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me. Now, this is the person who has become completely convinced about the goal of life due to practicing yoga or bhakti. And then his faith has become stronger and stronger. And with the culmination of knowledge and with the culmination of bhakti, he engages fully in this process because his vision is fixed in the lotus feet of the Lord. And 15:20, the last verse of this chapter, Krishna says, Iti guya tamam shastram idam uktam maya nagaha etad buddhva buddhiman syat krita krityascha bharata. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures. Now, the Vedic scriptures talk about many, many things. It's called the manual of the universe. Can you imagine if you have a manual of a TV, it's actually several pages long. If you buy a computer, you have another manual, another setup. If you buy a complicated machine, it has a very thick manual. It's like thousands of pages. But that's just small things in a machine. Can you imagine the manual of the universe? So the Vedas, so many scriptures. There are the 4 Vedas, which has thousands and thousands of verses. And then we have the Upanishads, 108 Upanishads. And then we have 18 Mahapuranas and 18 smaller Upapuranas. And then we have the Mahabharata, 100,000 verses in that Mahabharata, the Itihasas. We have Ramayana, 10,000 verses. So like that, so many things. And it talks about many things. How to it talks about karma, how to learn to live, it talks about economics, it talks about agriculture, it talks about architecture, it talks about medicine, it talks about war, it talks about fighting. So everything. It talks even about cooking, even about dancing, entertainment, you name it, every aspect is given in the Veda. And together with that, it is also given the higher knowledge of how to escape from this banyan tree, how to escape from this network of material existence. That knowledge is there in the Upanishads. So the rest of the Vedas, the thousands and thousands and thousands of verses, all talk about material activities, how to go to the higher material world, how to become Indra, how to go to the higher planets, how to enjoy like the Devas. So these things are given. But at the same time, the Upanishads talk about how to escape once and for all and go back to the spiritual world. So this knowledge and the essence of that Upanishad is the Vedanta Sutra. And the essence of that is the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. So that's why Krishna says it's the most confidential part of Vedic scriptures, what Krishna is explaining now. O sinless one, and it is disclosed now by me, none other than him, the Supreme Lord himself, so that nobody doubts. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. This is the art of working. Back to what we discussed in chapter 2 and 3. So we want to, before we end, we want to give you a story. This is the real story that happened. So we want to talk about our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, who embodies many of these conclusions that Krishna is presenting in this Bhagavad Gita. How one has to be, all the qualities that Krishna has mentioned. So I'm not going to highlight them, but we can be the judge by hearing about his activities. So very quickly, I will try to go through lots of pictures. So actually, Srila Prabhupada was born in Kolkata, and this was in the year 1896, so almost a century. And his father was Gaur Mohan De and Rajini. So they were, and he was not an ordinary child. He was actually born the day after Janmashtami, right after the Janmashtami is Krishna Jayanti. Right after that, the next day he was born. And even at the age of 5, you can see this picture here. Even at the age of 5, he was not an ordinary child. He used to enjoy, rather than do other things, he really liked to enjoy doing seva. So this is a Radha Yatra. He actually convinced his father. He saw a big Radha Yatra, chariot festival for Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra. So he convinced his father to actually build a cart for him, and he invited all his friends, and they had a children's Radha Yatra. So this is what he did. And even when he was born, the astrologer told that this boy, when he grows up, he will build 108 temples all over the world, and he will bring our Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra Radha Yatra all over the world. So then what happened? Then, of course, he grew up and everything. It's a very long story. But at the age of 20, he later met, he was a Gandhian. He used to follow Gandhi, right? But later he met his guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. And when he met this guru, his guru convinced him to give up this Gandhian idea and to become a Vaishnava. The mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to spread this knowledge to everybody in this world so that the living entities can learn to transcend, that is the prime purpose of life. And he became convinced. And then at the age of 26, in 1932, he took formal Diksha, initiation from the Guru. And he was called Abhaya Charanara Das. So then then he was a family man at that time. So he had a business, he was a pharmacist, and he went on, and eventually things, ups and downs and everything. But he never gave up his spiritual connection. And then in 1959, he took sannyas and from his guru, from the Guru Maharaj's god brother. And sannyas means he left his family at the age at the age of 50 something. And this is where he lived after that. He was well-to-do before that, but after he taking sannyas, he completely focused his life in serving the mission of his Guru Maharaj, which was the Gaudiya Math at that time. And here is his room in Radha Damodar temple. So this is his bed where he used to sleep on. And while he was in Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan, he was always remembering his Guru Maharaj's instruction. His Guru Maharaj told him, because he was educated in English, Guru Maharaj always told him, go and preach to the Western world. You can speak English, so preach to the English people. So then Prabhupada was thinking, but I know he's just a sannyasi. This is 1959, but he was always planning, and he was writing his Srimad Bhagavatam translation in English. He started translating all the scriptures in English. So this is the actual room in Radha Damodar temple, which ISKCON bought over, and we kept him there. So one day, while he was going around distributing books, and then he came to see Sumati Murarji. Now this lady is the owner of a shipping company. So he asked her, can you please do me the favor of giving me a ticket so that I can go to the USA, because I need to preach there. I need to preach over there the Bhagavad Dharma. But this Sumati Murarji says, oh, Maharaj, you are so old, you're 60 something, and you're sannyas. You know, USA is a horrible place. Where you're going to get food? You will die. Everybody there eats meat. You will not get any kind of food. Who's going to do? And do you know anybody? So Prabhupada said, no, I don't know anybody. But I have to do it. I'm getting old. Before I die, I must satisfy the instructions of my Guru Maharaj. But Subhati Murarji said no, and he went off. But each time he will try, and he will ask her again and again. And then finally she tell, okay, fine. Since you're so determined, I will give you the ticket, but I really feel bad. I feel I'm sending you to your death. But Prabhupada was determined. He took that ticket, and it was a ticket in a steamer. This is a steamship, the Jaladuta. It's a steamer ship. It's a cargo ship. So there was no luxury. It wasn't a luxury liner. And those days it takes weeks, months to actually go to the US by this. So while in this steamer, he only had 40 rupees equivalent. 40 rupees equivalent, and he had a trunk full of Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, of the ones which he had translated. And he had a sack full of potatoes and rice. So that's it. He survived with potato and rice. He cooked himself, and he had a small cabin, but he was terribly seasick. And then he actually suffered 2 heart attacks within the journey. And one day he actually had Krishna come in his dream, and Krishna just, Krishna was rowing the boat and coming to him. But ever since that dream, the Atlantic Ocean, which is extremely, Atlantic Ocean is one of the most, it's not a calm ocean. It's a very tempestuous ocean. So amazingly, the captain said that was the best, most calmest Atlantic Ocean which I have ever traversed in my 35 years of experience. So after Krishna came in his dream, he no longer suffered from his seasickness. But anyway, Prabhupada, he was alone. He came down from Jaladuta in the Boston harbor. So he wrote a poem. He said, I didn't know whether to turn right or turn left. It was completely alien for me. Just imagine, 69. At the age of 69, he actually went there alone with just 40 rupees equivalent and with his Bhagavatam sets. Don't know what to do. So this was Boston at that time, right? New York. So this is Prabhupada at that time, looking completely in a different alien world. But he was very surrendered to the Supreme Lord. And he was very surrendered to the instructions of his Guru Maharaj. And he was very, very surrendered to the chanting of the Maha Mantra. So you know what he did? He had somehow managed to, with 1 or 2 connections from his god brothers in India, he eventually found a place, but they were not very helpful. So they couldn't really help him much also. So, but what he did, he went to Tompkins Square Park, which is a park in New York, and he sat there and he started chanting with his kartals. And as I mentioned previously, this is the land of the hippies. The hippie movement was growing at that time. Somehow they were attracted to his very pure singing. and they just came and they started also dancing and singing around him. So like that, he built some connection with some of them, and he invited them to come to his new storefront. So he rented a small second-hand storefront, a very small place in Bury Street, and there he used to have lectures every week on the Bhagavad Gita. And these people used to come, these hippies, they were, some of them were drug addicts. They used to stay there. They used to smoke around him. So somehow he tolerated all of that, and he gave them so much of mercy. He used to cook for them. He used to check on them. He used to give them, and every night they will sit and chant with him. So this was the power of the chanting of the Maha Mantra. And amazingly, by Krishna's mercy and blessing, in 1966, he actually established he got a few serious devotees, about 10 of them, who became very serious and who slowly took up this Krishna consciousness. Because at that time, the guru is very popular, the age of the guru. Everybody wanted to have a guru, and this was hippie culture. But by Prabhupada's mercy and patience, they started to really become devotees, from hippie to become devotees. And in 1966, he established the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. So everybody asked him, why you didn't name the society after yourself? Because usually a lot of gurus, they named it after themselves, right? But Prabhupada will say, no, this is Krishna's movement, not my movement. I'm doing this for him. So, and why not God consciousness? But Prabhupada was very clear, no, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna consciousness. So like that. And then by Krishna's mercy and Prabhupada's expert guidance, there was an explosion. It's called the Hare Krishna explosion. Somehow, some connections here and there, his disciples assisting him, and they were very dedicated. They actually sold out. They lived with him. They stayed with him, even husband and wife, they stayed with him in the temple, and they were completely dedicated and surrendered to Srila Prabhupada. They were completely won over by his purity and by his love. And in this way, they were willing to do anything for him. So, and therefore the Krishna consciousness explosion began in New York, and it spread all over, and a lot of news coverages were done. And there was a famous, many presentations, talks, even a rock mantra concert. All these things helped to really publicize the movement. Of course, there were a lot of negative publicity also, because people were always envious and all that. But nevertheless, Prabhupada was very expert to convert everything into positive publicity. And he expertly handled all the journalists and all the people who he met. He had university programs, so many different programs and he was not just in New York. He started moving to other parts of the country. He went to Canada. From New York, he went to California. And finally, he started to have a Radha Yatra in San Francisco. So this was a major breakthrough. So this was the first Radha Yatra ever had outside of India. And this is the picture of that same Radha Yatra. And this was a cart built by his disciples only. His disciples, one of the disciples happened to be a carpenter, Shyamasundar Prabhu. And also there was other people like Jayananda Das. So all these people, they all helped him, and they installed Jagannath, Baladev as Subhadra. So there's lots of beautiful, wonderful stories about how the deities first came, how these things all happened, but we will skip all that. I'm just giving an overview. So it was a huge success. And then they also went to London, a group of devotees sent by Prabhupada to London, and they had amazing success over there. They actually met up with George Harrison. They even, George Harrison was very sympathetic to the movement. He was very attracted. And together they actually launched an album. The Beatles had an album, and that really propelled them to more publicity in London and in England. And then they had their Radha Yatra in England, 1970. This is the 1970 Radha Yatra in London. They actually went to Trafalgar Square. These are all the people. And like this, he had many disciples. Some of the disciples became sannyas, and Many sannyasis were his disciples, and he sent them. He sent them all over the world. He sent them to Russia, communist Russia. He sent them to China, communist China. He sent them to Middle East. He sent them to different parts of the world. He even came to Malaysia. Srila Prabhupada actually came to Malaysia for a few days, and he planted the seed here. So like that, the movement spread all over Europe, Germany, France, New Zealand, Australia. So like that, it came. And this is Srila Prabhupada. It never, all the success never actually changed his lifestyle. You know, Srila Prabhupada, within 12 years, he actually spread from nothing to a worldwide society of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. And this shows Prabhupada towards in his deathbed. When he was sick in 1977, when he was about to pass away, what was the last thing he was doing? Throughout the days, he would actually, while he was alive, he would be sleeping only 2 hours. He will spend most of his time managing the movement, translating his books, writing books, giving lectures. And this was what Prabhupada was doing even just few seconds before he left the body. He was actually translating Srimad Bhagavatam. He was giving lecture on Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is a Prabhu holding the dictaphone. You can see the dictaphone here. And Prabhupada was still translating. So if you read the Srimad Bhagavatam now, the last few verses in Canto 10 is actually Prabhupada's translation just before he left the world. So can you doubt who he was thinking of when he left the world? So this is the perfection. So between 1968 to 1977, he dictated 22,000 pages of text. He distributed 1 million copies of Back to Godhead magazine. He wrote 7,000 letters to his disciples, which was published in 5 volumes of books. And he actually wrote, he compiled 42 volumes of books in just 12 years at the age of 69 to 70 plus. He produced innumerable recordings, bhajans, classes. He established 108 temples and farm communities within 12 years. He published 147 books. He traveled around the world 14 times. He circled the globe 14 times. At that age, at an old age, you know, traveling is a austerity, but he did it. And he changed the lives of 10,000 people who were all his disciples. So this was the Hare Krishna explosion. And he did all this in only 11 years at the age of 70 to 80. All by simply sleeping 2 hours a day. So this is Srila Prabhupada's legacy. And now the Radha Yatras are still going on in all major cities of the world. And these are future projects. This is our headquarters in Sri Mayapur Dham. This is our big temple. It's called the Adbhuta Mandir, or the Amazing Temple, because it's extremely large and it has an amazing structure inside. And this is Srila Prabhupada's Murti. After he took Samadhi, this is his Samadhi in Vrindavan. This is his Murti in one of the temples. So we also have a movie made out of this. If you're interested to hear more about Srila Prabhupada, we have the Hare Krishna, the mantra, the movement, and the Swami. So this was released a few years ago. All right, so we stop here. Thank you so much for staying with us. And now for the takeaways of this chapter, right? So the material world is a mere pale reflection of the spiritual world. That was the takeaway. Purushottama Krishna, how Krishna is the splendor in everything, how Krishna is our ever well-wisher, how he is actually facilitating our desire to enjoy within this material world. At the same time, he's giving us also the way back to him. One who knows this has full and complete knowledge. So that is the conclusion of this chapter. Okay, so with that, let me just end with this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. The translation is like this: one who constantly hears and chants the holy name of the Lord and hears and chants about his activities can very easily attain the platform of pure devotional service, which can cleanse the dirt from one's heart. One cannot achieve such purification merely by observing vows and performing Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. So it's a very important verse. It says, simply by hearing and chanting, one can come straight away very easily to the platform of pure devotional service, which can cleanse our heart and establish in our heart devotion to the Supreme Lord. So one can achieve such purification easily, which cannot be achieved in any other way. So that is the importance of this chanting of this Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So let us chant this together. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.